despite the significant contributions made by the social justice sector to the realization of our constitutional values, the sector is rarely recognized for its contributions. The role of the sector was again very evident during the COVID-19 pandemic and subsequent lockdown, as it actively responded to and even focused on violations of human rights and social justice needs of many South Africans, especially marginalized communities. This is according to the Social Justice Sector Review report. The inaugural Social Justice Assembly has been taking place this week in Pretoria. Joining us now is Nomzamo Zondo, who is the Executive Director at SERI. Nomzamo, thank you for making time. So today, my understanding was the last day of the Assembly. How have you reflected on the decades of social justice in South Africa, and did you come up with solutions to address the multiple crises facing the country?
Thank you so much, Clement, for allowing us to be in this room. I think the first thing that we're able to do in the last 2 days is reflect on the impact of the sector. The fact that I'm speaking right after a report around GBV, around the murder of women, an issue that has been raised by this very sector. This sector has provided shelters for women, has been the one that's been at the forefront fighting for the state to provide protection for women, to change the legal regime. And we, in the last few days, we renewed our commitment to building a South Africa for everyone. I think one of the things that was important for us was the fact that we feel that there is a gap between this government and the people, and we committed ourselves to working towards mobilizing and organizing South Africans once more so that they can self-govern again. That even though we sit in a country that has elections that are declared free and fair, we see many of the problems that communities and individuals once solved being completely ignored. And we could not find solutions, unfortunately. We are sitting in the middle of a poly crisis that will probably take a lot of time to resolve, but requires energy. So what we were able to do is make a commitment to work towards resolving those crises, to work at making sure that those who are in government work towards resolving the crisis. In the very same way, making sure that South Africans take back the power that they have to actually be part of making sure this country once more is the country that we've dreamed of. Yeah,
you've launched a report on the state of the sector. What is that report telling you? Because the social justice sector over the years has made, critical contributions in society, especially in marginalized communities.
Look, so I think on the bright side, I think that report allowed us to count our victories. As I mentioned, I think many people forget that HIV, the HIV stigma, the deaths that were seen by people who lived through the 90s are a dot in history now because of the work of this sector. People also forget that the ongoing struggle for equal education is a struggle that is being forged in this very sector. But what that report did also on the negative side was to show us that we have not been strategizing collectively as a sector. It reminded us that actually we don't have one vision. And in fact, in the last 2 days, it was in the last days I started thinking about, so if we know what we don't want to see the corruption that we're seeing today, we don't want to see the hunger that we're seeing today, we don't want to see the unemployment of people that we're seeing today, but we don't have an agreement on what we're actually trying to build. And almost every 2 hours, we'd get to a point where we'd say, we need to get a minimum program that we are all driving towards, to put together the vision that we're actually working towards. And of course, there are things that were obvious to us. And in fact, today we discussed the energy crisis, we discussed xenophobia, we discussed GBV, and we discussed the wellness of people who are in this sector, because we know South Africa is a country that is riddled with trauma, and that trauma is not only carried by citizens, but is almost compounded in our sector, where we are also now living with the trauma of this day, and being a sector that is sometimes unfunded, with people that are simply giving their time to resolve things that actually are key to what government should be doing, are key to what the Constitution demands of our government, and are actually even key to the vision that the Constitution it sets out about what the country that we're trying to drive towards.
Yeah, and to drive towards that collective vision, that one vision you speak of, you're going to need the collaboration of all stakeholders. And I'm just wondering here if your contributions are being recognized as the social justice sector, and are there opportunities where you've managed to work with government and other stakeholders to get to this one vision where we are able to respond to the multiple crises that we're dealing with in the country?
Look, I think in convening these last 2 days, one of the things that was front and center was our relationship with the state, because we know that for almost all of what we are trying to do, it will fail if the state does not buy in. But one of the things that came up in the room is if as South Africans we're unable to convince the people that we are electing to build the South Africa that will include and provide for all of us, then we need to communicate to them that actually they can be replaced, that they can be removed. And that does mean that we're not only just saying in the government that is in place now they can continue as they are. No. This sector is saying we want to go back to South Africans to say this cannot continue. We are seeing our country burn every day. And we are seeing your lives become worse and worse every day. If we continue in this manner, we will not have a country to speak of. And therefore, we all need to come back. We need to come back probably even stronger than we were in the late 80s and in the early 90s. We need to come back and fight for our country. And we need to be clear that government is sitting on a public ticket. They are there on our instruction, and they're supposed to be there implementing our vision for this country. And it can't be that they govern for self-interest while we languish in poverty without even a hope that will change tomorrow.
Yeah. Let's talk about resource allocation now, because, I mean, that's an issue that most organizations like yourselves have to contend with. Are there enough resources? Because if you look at the work that you do, that requires a lot. Hence the question earlier about the support you are getting from government particularly.
Look, so the one thing that is comforting, right, is that we do have instruments within government to fund the civil society sector. So we have the National Lottery, we have the NTA. So there were structures that were put in place precisely as an outcome of struggle to ensure this sector is funded. But the reality is that has not happened. Instead, we learned through the Zondo Commission that a lot of the money in the lottery was squandered to corruption. And so many of the organizations in our sector either are depending on the unwaged labor of poor people. So we have people running, providing support to GBV victims for free, and sometimes at the cost of taking care of their own families. When they are fortunate, it's through gifts of philanthropic organizations, and it is because of that actually part of the demands that will come from our sector would be for the state to make sure that there's sustainable funding, not from philanthropists. If anything, there should be a wealth tax that not only contributes to the funding of our sector, but contributes to the well-being of the whole country. And we are saying that tax is public money that should be used towards the public good. So if we are out in the forefront fighting for equal education, we are in effect trying to meet. We are actually trying to realize what is a constitutional imperative to make sure that there is education that is enjoyed by each and every child. Similarly, if we speak about health, it's the very same thing. Earlier on, when you referenced our sector, you spoke about our intervention during COVID and how it was this same sector that rallied to the side of the poor when there wasn't even food to eat. Yet there isn't a sufficient plan from government, and especially an implemented plan to make sure this sector is financed, that the gaps, the huge gaps that we're seeing on the side of the welfare of people, that we're seeing in terms of what should be public goods, that gap is filled through the public purse in a way that ensures that the financing is not borne by the poor, that in fact those that have the most resources contribute towards it, possibly through taxation, possibly through an allocation that says, as a country, we are a country that dreams of a transformation where the quality of life of everyone is improved. We're a country that dreams of a potential of everyone being realized, and therefore these resources will be targeted to make sure that becomes a reality. And that's what in this meeting we are demanding, that this sector must be resourced primarily by the state, but not only them. We are clear that corporates, again, have benefited from the work of this sector. If this sector didn't exist, this country would be on fire. And if they accept that, then there is a responsibility upon corporate South Africa to finance the work that is being done by the social justice sector, not for us as a sector, and not even for South Africans, but to ensure that they have a stable environment in which they can do business. In July 2021, in August 2021, Business South Africa said to us, we know that there was looting because of the instability, because of the food insecurity, because of the high unemployment, and because of that we want to release funds to resolve that issue. And we are saying we are a sector that has been working consistently for close to 30 years to make that better South Africa possible. And therefore, if you are going to invest, consider investing in this sector so that we can continue that work. Secondly, in relation to the call to the state knows that much of what we are doing is what they should be doing. And in fact, when they fund our sector, they actually make their job a lot easier. Yeah. Not only to BV, not possibly only in relation to education, but also in relation to housing and many other issues. If you look at the issue of climate change and what has been happening in relation to climate change, it has been again this sector that has been leading in saying, in speaking to everyone to say, we are getting lost. This is a priority for all of us. So the role of this sector, one, yes, needs to be recognized, but it needs to be financed from a common pool and also from those who do have money. We can't continue to be funded from the pockets of poor people who are members of social movements, or to be funded through the unwaged labor of South Africans who do themselves need food at the table at the end of the day.
Yeah. Nomzamo Zondo, Executive Director at SERI, I appreciate your time.